many times have you heard, especially in 2020 in this dynamic of politics that we're seeing right now, how many times have you heard about a United States Senate vote of 100 to 0? We got that just this week in the United States Senate when a new bill was passed dealing with reforms to the Olympic Commission and the Olympics here in the United States. There's some remarkable stuff going on that was absolutely essential given the abuse that has been going on for years in the Olympics. Of course, most notably highlighted perhaps by Larry Nassar and the sexual abuse scandal surrounding that medical doctor who has been sentenced. And my gosh, just recognizing all of the trials and tribulations of so many different Olympians and what they have gone through, and children in Olympic affiliated organizations for, sports, various sports and so forth. That is important. We cannot forget it. We must recognize it. And now the United States Senate has done exactly that in passing a brand new bill. The Strengthening U.S. Olympics Act is part of it here. And I am so pleased to welcome here on Jimmy at the Crossroads someone who was very instrumental in trying behind the scenes to help get this thing shaped and moved forward. Eli Bremer, who in 2008 was a modern pentathlete in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, and then also Judge Rosemarie Aquilina joins us. She was the judge who sentenced Larry Nassar. Welcome to you both for joining to the program today. I appreciate you joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, and congratulations. I mean, this is something that has been well over a year, few years in the works, particularly in the Senate side. U.S. Senator Cory Gardner. Now it's the balls in the House of Representatives for this bill with Representative Diana DeGette, a Democrat, Gardner, a Republican over in the Senate. We'll talk about what the bill is in a little bit here, but I would love, Eli Bremer, if you could please sort of set the table for us to initiate on why this bill was necessary and what's going on here with the Olympic reforms.
Yeah, well, Jimmy, thanks for having us on, and thanks for talking about this. It's a very important issue. I'll start by saying the Olympics are America's team, and this is something that should be very important to every person in our country. It's not partisan. This is something that's for Americans of all stripes, and so that's why this is important. For years, the Olympic Committee has very much struggled. And I'd spent years talking about systemic problems on governance inside the Olympics. And in 2016, sort of the Band-Aid got ripped off when we discovered that there were massive amounts of systemic sexual abuse going on, and it was being covered up by the governance problems that the Olympic Committee had for years. So I started working with the sexual assault victims, both in gymnastics that Judge Aquilina has helped so much, but also in other sports like swimming and taekwondo. And this is part of a comprehensive reform that will deal with both the structural parts of the Olympics, but also things, tactical pieces like sexual assault reporting and inappropriate relationships with coaches that leads to rape.
Judge Rosemarie Aquilina, I mean, obviously the Nassar trial was something that so many, countless Americans were just glued to, very deeply concerned about the sexual abuse that was happening, tied in with the gymnastics programs and so forth. Can you please just sort of refresh us on what happened with Nassar and how that is emblematic of something that has been just so ruinous to the Olympics for many years and now is finally under the microscope?
So Nassar ended up before 3 different judges, federal and then 2 state. I sentenced him to 40 to 175 years. The other judge in Michigan did 40 to 125 years. And a federal judge sentenced him to 60 years, and that was for child pornography. What has happened in the cases that were in front of me shows this culture of silence that Eli has been fighting against, the sexual assault of athletes, and what he did under the guise of medical, without permission of parents, without knowledge of anyone, without gloves, without lubricant, groomed everyone to believe that this sexual act, placing his fingers in young girls' vaginas, in some cases over 800 times, was medically treatment, when in fact it was not treatment. It was grooming the world to believe he was the best, he was the only, and it was medical. And it was very harmful to these women. And they will have now a lifetime of healing, which is why this legislation is so important, because it finally places the athlete over money and medals, and it gives accountability, voice, and protection. And as Eli said, it's fabulous for the United States, but we are always the leader, and this is happening all over the world. So finally, this is a step to not just change the United States, but the world.
Eli Bremer, one of the things that the judge just pointed out was this culture of silence. And I'd like for you to expand upon that a little bit, because whether it's sexual abuse or other kinds of abuse, there was a culture of silence going on in the Olympics for many years where this kind of abuse would happen and it would just be swept under the rug. People wouldn't speak about it. And it took a very concerted effort. I think that, of course, with Larry Nassar, that helped to bring a lot of attention to some aspects of the issue. But even after that, you guys still had to, you and so many other former Olympians had to do a heck of a lot of work in order to draw attention and say, this is much bigger than just one man.
Absolutely, and I'll take issue with your use of the word "was" a problem. This is still a problem, and I've received threats. My family's received threats, very, very overt, for speaking out on these issues. But it's important because this is a $250 million entity that is a government-sanctioned monopoly. It's granted a charter by the federal government, and it's been run like a private club. And so we need to expose what's been going on. There needs to be a broad cultural change, and that's a huge issue that will still need to be undertaken because it definitely is not there yet. I got a call just a few days ago from an athlete who had been effectively accosted for speaking out and was told your position's in threat for speaking out on an issue that was very germane. It had directly to do with athlete abuse. And so it's still alive and well today. And our hope is that as Senate Bill 2330 now moves to the House and then gets implemented, we have this Olympic Commission that'll take effect. I really hope we're able to really go through and gut the system and change the culture.
Eli Bremer, I appreciate your yeoman's work on this and so many others who really worked together to make this happen. 100-0 in the United States Senate. Judge Rosemarie Aquilina, who again presided over the sentencing of Larry Nassar in 2018. I want to put up a little bit of video, at least in the background, of in 2019, so just last year, there was a press conference, which I was so pleased to be able to attend, where we had a number of former Olympians together to talk about the need for reform. There you are, Judge, speaking to the group. It was such a profoundly impactful moment for me because this wasn't something that I had followed very closely. And yet when I was there hearing so many different stories presented about what kind of abuse had been, and as Eli pointed out, is continuing to go on, it was shocking to me. And I know that you felt so passionately to get out in front as well at this press conference, which is when Senator Cory Gardner, the lead sponsor in the Senate, and U.S. Representative Diana DeGette were announcing Representative DeGette's signing on as a lead sponsor in the House of Representatives. But I would like for you, please, to just share sort of why this is so important from your standpoint and why you were there at the press conference and have been an advocate for this reform legislation.
I believe that the safety of children needs to be in the forefront of everyone's mind. And we, as the adults, are the voice of the voiceless. And children really have no voice. And what's happening with the Olympics, which everybody looks to. And when you think of Olympians, it's not just those people we see on television competing. It's the young child who starts in gymnastics or in basketball or whatever sport they're interested in. And then they figure out, hey, this is what I want to do. So every child is susceptible. And it's interesting because the studies show that positivity creates better athletes, and yet they are berated, belittled. They are groomed to believe that if they don't succumb to cruelty, they will be kicked off, they won't succeed. It's the opposite of what we should teach our children, and understand that I may be dead when all of this is passed and done, because we have so much work to do, but we are protecting the next generation, not just the current generation. must have voice for children, safety for children. They need to know that there's informed consent and that when they say no, whether they are 2, 12, or 20, it really does mean no. And coaches, doctors, teachers do not have the right to harm them in any way. And I just have the question, why would a coach be afraid to use positivity when we know it works?
Yeah. Eli Bremer, in just a moment, I want to get to the specifics of what the legislation entails. But first, can you just underscore for us that the sexual abuse is a significant component? Larry Nassar, prime example of that. But there was a lot more, and is a lot more, that has been going on to Olympians in terms of mistreatment beyond the sexual abuse and other avenues. Can you sort of tell us a little bit about some of the other kinds of things that have been perpetrated against Olympians of all different age groups?
Yeah, absolutely. There's substantial amounts of emotional abuse that the judge just sort of alluded to there. There's a great documentary that just came out on HBO. It was produced by Michael Phelps. It stars Bodie Miller, Katie Eulander, Gracie Gold, and several others. I think Apollo Ono's in there too. And it talks about the sort of the mental abuse that's taken place. These are some of the biggest names in the world in sport, and it really shows how the system has failed them. Athletes are financially put in turmoil while the system generates literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year. A news report just came out last week that said that the Olympic Committee spent $20 million more on its staff than it spent on athletes. In fact, they employ more employees in the Olympic system by about 50% than we actually have athletes who go to the Olympics. So this is what I started looking at years ago, was that we have a systemic problem that can lead to abuse. Unfortunately, we've seen the abuse take place sexually, financially, and emotionally. And again, 2 documentaries that I'd recommend to everybody. Watch Athlete A, which is on Netflix, and then also watch The Weight of Gold, which is on HBO. So both of those are a must-watch for everybody.
Sure. Eli Bremer, let's talk about the specifics of this bill. Give us a recap of the name of the legislation. And I understand that it is a real compromise because it blended 2 bills, including the one I was alluding to in terms of Senator Cory Gardner being lead sponsor of, melded in with another piece of legislation that covers a couple of different angles when you put it all together. So what will this bill actually do if, and I think when, it becomes law?
Yeah, I believe it will become law. I think we've got broad bipartisan support. There's been literally around 500 Olympians that have signed a letter asking Congress to pass this. So it's Senate Bill 2330 is the final, the number of the bill, and that'll now go over to the House. And it was a meshing together of 2 bills. So the part that I've been working on was the Olympic Reform Commission. That was the brainchild of Senator Gardner. He reached across the aisle, and Congresswoman Diana DeGette took this up and said, I want to co-sponsor this. So that was the angle I've been working on. That was what Judge Aquilina came out last year to Colorado. And thank you, Judge, for making that trip. And then the Nassar victims had actually been working on other, sort of, I would say, more tactical reforms regarding sexual assault reporting, things like that. There had been a bit of friction between the 2 sides, just saying, hey, look, we need to make this all come together. And thankfully, the politicians worked together. They said these 2 efforts are actually synergistic, not competitive. They brought the 2 efforts together, and now we have a very good comprehensive reform bill in Senate Bill 2330.
Yeah, one thing just finally for you, Eli Bremer, about the commission is that it actually has some teeth. Like, this isn't something that is purely, hey, let's just examine the issues and then say, hey, this is a problem, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's going to have full subpoena power. In fact, this was something the Olympic Committee fought broadly against. In my conversations with Congress, they were complaining wildly that the commission is going to have the ability to actually look behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. The reality of it is the Olympic Committee, though again federally chartered, it's effectively a public organization, has never had an outside look at it. No one's ever been able to look under the hood, actually see what's going on. And we know the atrocities that are there. Former disgraced CEO Scott Blackman was emailing Steve Penny, the disgraced CEO of USA Gymnastics, and Blackman was deleting his emails on the server and then lying to the FBI about it. Wow. When you have an organization that has that much cultural corruption at the top, you can only imagine the other things that are going on in there. So that's why the Senate and Congress has wisely put in subpoena power to give this commission the ability to go in and say what is really going on behind the curtains that are the U.S. Olympic movement.
Yeah. Judge Rosemarie Aquilina, so appreciate you joining us as well. I mean, big question, of course, is why should everyday Americans who may watch the Olympics on TV every year, that they're on the television and enjoy the competition and support for the USA, but why should Americans really care about the reforms that are being put forward here expansively? Because, I mean, one could say, hey, this is not a top priority because we should be focused on coronavirus. We should be focused on the civil unrest that we're seeing, or police reforms, or this and that. Why are you focusing in on the Olympics? Underscore for us, please, why this is indeed such an important thing, especially given, as Eli Bremer's pointed out so aptly multiple times here, that it is a sponsored monopoly by the U.S. federal government.
Anyone who enjoys the Olympics should know that this sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse is more epidemic than the coronavirus. And it has been going on for a long time. So if you enjoy the Olympics, can you really sit at home comfortable knowing that those athletes that you're enjoying got there by being abused? If we support the Olympics, we must support this bill. We must tell the sponsors who are supporting the Olympics, do not support the Olympics until and unless there is meaningful change to protect athletes. Then we will really have a much better Olympics, because every athlete will do better. Positivity gets positivity. This torture that they're going through, we have athletes dying. There was just an article in Boston, 2 young girls committed suicide at the hands of a terroristic kind of coach. They couldn't take it anymore. How many more suicides? Can you really enjoy the Olympics knowing this is going on? I think not. I can't. I want to know they're safe.
And to that point, Judge Aquilina, I mean, the Olympics is one of the many different battlegrounds, shall we say, for this kind of abuse that is happening against young people in all different sectors of life.
Exactly. It happens. And we've got to flip the script. Safety has to come first over money and medals at every single level, and especially at the highest level of the Olympics. And why can't we be the example for the world? This bill is a great start. We need to have it passed in the House. We need to tell Trump to sign it. No conversation, just get at the table and sign it. It is needed now.
Well, it seems like we're on track for that, especially when you get 100-0 in the United States Senate. And a final word to you, Eli Bremer. I want to put up a picture. This is 2008. Eli Bremer competing in the Olympics as a modern pentathlete. And from your personal standpoint, you competed in the Olympics 2008 in Beijing. You have so many friends from when you were there and also since then that you have befriended all across from all different brackets of age, from all different time periods, competing in the Olympics for Team USA. What does this mean to you personally?
Said, we don't have to have an abusive environment. It actually hurts our athletic performance. And every top tier athlete will tell you that. So knowing that many athletes have gotten there and are broken and hurt through the process is, to me, it's very saddening because I've seen that. I've known the athletes who have committed suicide over this, and every single one is a travesty. And so I think the judge is correct. We should be a worldwide leader on this. We need to change the culture. We need to say, like she said, positivity. There's no reason to have abuse. There's no reason to teach kids through an abusive method. I will tell you, as a former number 2 athlete in the world, abusive coaching does not get you there. Positive sports science, technology, things like that can actually help an athlete out. That's what gets you there. And this legislation is going to do a tremendous amount of work toward fixing our Olympic system and making us a true leader worldwide in sports.
And human decency. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. This kind of abuse is patently unacceptable. Not only does it not work, but it's also morally wrong, just as much as covering it up has been morally wrong. Eli Bremer, great work with so many others on this important effort to get the legislation passed. And Judge Aquilina, thank you so much for your support of this effort and just being a spokesperson for those who had no voice, as you mentioned earlier, the culture of silence. We need people to hear about what's going on, and finally they are and have been, and meaningful steps are happening in Washington, D.C. So thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jimmy.
For keeping the message going. This is important. What you are doing is important.
Absolutely, and you as well. Thank you, Eli Bremer, Judge Rosemarie Aquilina. Appreciate your time today. And they are truly incredible people, as so many others are. When I was at this press conference, it was a remarkable sight to see so many gathered together, and to see Senator Gardner, a Republican of Colorado, and Representative Diana DeGette of Colorado, a Democrat, joined together in saying we need this reform to happen. And so I'm pleased to highlight this. I did some interviews and conversations last year at the time when that press conference happened. And now here we are, the Senate 100-0 amidst all the divisions that we are seeing in this country right now. It is a wonderful sight to behold. You just watched a clip from Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't miss more engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel today. You want to catch our live show. And I love your support.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.
Awesome.